Hey, how's it going? Hope everyone's well. It is a chilly day. It's a chilly, damp, rainy day. But I'm not complaining because I am more than ready for the fall. Feeling a little bit better than the last video I did, but it's been almost 2 weeks. Just went to a new dentist, and the original dentist that did the oral surgery definitely fractured a bone. Yeah, that was wild. It was painful. It was really painful. And I could feel it. And so I'm glad the dentist confirmed, because in my head, I'm like, God, it's been almost 2 weeks. Like, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Why is this not healed? But it's still swollen on this side, more like outside the gum line, so you really can't tell, but he could feel it to the touch, and it hurts to the touch still. So just crazy that it's been almost 2 weeks and I'm still dealing with this nonsense. And the most frustrating part about it is that when I exercise, when I do anything physical, it sends blood flow to the area, and then it like inflames me more. So I haven't been able to be as active as I would like, which has been hard. And then potentially why it hasn't healed fully is because I've been hiking, and he's like, you shouldn't be hiking. And I'm like, yeah, I can't. I can't sit still. Like, there's just no way. But it could explain why I've been obscenely tired, plus change of season, late fall late summer to early fall is a fifth season in Chinese medicine. I've talked about this before. So it is not a season that we recognize in the West, but there's a lot of indigenous cultures and Chinese medicine that this is a pretty big deal transition from late summer to early fall. So I always get a little tired at this stage too, but boy, oh boy, this whole surgery thing, who would have thunk? One tooth, one extraction, and I just went to the wrong people, and they didn't do a great job, and they weren't thorough, and ended up causing a fracture. But it is what it is. So I was listening to they're a couple. They're both psychotherapists, the Gottmans. They're renowned. And this one was interesting because, and they use that word a lot, because they have for being so clinically based. I think the wife has been in the clinical field for 50 years, just a really long time. With, and not getting burnt out. So good for her. But, a lot of what they said was, in terms of relational dynamics, was leading with curiosity and being really interested, taking interest in the other person, which I think we've all seen in the dating world. It's kind of strange, isn't it, when you're sitting across from someone and they're not asking you one question. They don't want to get to know you at all. That's always really interesting. I've definitely had those experiences too. And the biggest takeaway, and the one thing that I wanted to share today, this is something that I'm believing more and more in, is that compatibility is kind of like not an accurate assessment of if your relationship could go the distance or how well you could get along together. It was actually social interaction within the moment. So I believe the gentleman's last name was Fickle, and he did one of the largest studies on this, but it was within the realm of speed dating. And what captivated people and created connections was how they felt. And this is why, and I know a lot of men who are extremely left-brained will bump up against this because they want the statistics and they want the case studies. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to how you feel in the moment with that person and how they're making you feel. And that is actually the best indicator of whether or not there's a real connection, like a more genuine, authentic connection, and if the dynamic could go the distance, versus shared core values and compatibility, etc. The other interesting thing about what they were talking about, and there's been enormous studies done on this as well, is that because I think I kind of stopped believing that opposites attract. I just thought maybe that was a myth. I mean, I know it works for some people, but there's actually a lot of cutting edge research that still indicates that this is true. And they use themselves as an example, which I kind of like when professionals do, because I like getting into the underbelly and the inner workings of their life, because a lot of times people that wear many professional hats, and like this couple's pretty much world famous. I mean, they've written like 51 books. Some of them, one is How to Fight Fair. They've done amazing work. I think they're responsible for the 4 horsemen theory in relationships as well. But anyway, so they do say that opposites attract. So, and one of the ways, the tests that prove this was they gave, women like to wear their man's clothing. And a lot of men like that. It makes them feel good. Like it kind of like gives them a little ego boost, or they think that's cute. Well, they did a test and they had women pick out, it might have been just t-shirts, or maybe it was a variety of clothing, but I think it was just t-shirts, to pick the ones out that they liked the smell of the best, because that whole pheromone thing it's real. And they wanted to see if the women would pick the shirts that matched men based on their preferences. And it actually matched them with men who were diabolically different. And when I say different, I mean their genetic makeup. They had 2 completely different sets of genes. Like the genetics did not match up at all. And that goes down to immunity. They could not have chosen the scent of men that was so drastically different from anyone who they would pick. And so I think, so then there's the largest study ever done. I forget this gentleman's name, but honestly, the podcast was really hard to follow. And even the gentleman who was relaying, and it was all statistic based. So even the gentleman relaying the stats on this had a hard time ciphering out the data because it was such a large scale study. There were many authors that contributed to the writings on the findings, like I think over like 50 authors. But essentially what that came down to is that oftentimes what people are rating as very high as far as preferences, like, so say it's looks and kindness and compassion, what they said they preferred, and then they tracked them on dates and how they interacted with the dates, and then they measured behavior and like post-date questions up with the initial testing on preferences, like whatever the criteria was. And man and woman almost always matched up higher in the moment with people that did not meet the preferences that they identified at the beginning of the study. So I think they differentiated them between ideal preferences and real preferences. And the real preferences ended up being the things that they actually liked in the moment, which really gives credence to what the Gottmans are saying. And this is why online dating is such a failure for most people, because an in-person connection, you just can't beat it. You have to have the experience of that person's energetics and that social interaction in person. So keeping people online for a long time, not be willing to meet up, like none of that's very helpful. So I think oftentimes we might surprise ourselves with being attracted to someone that's not our type. If you feel like you fall into that category of someone who has a type, you might end up liking someone that wouldn't have been on your radar. Because when you're shopping for someone online, you're going by your ideal preferences. You don't really know that person, and you're not having any kind of in-person experience. That's why often you get offline, you go into the real world date, and you're completely disappointed because that person didn't match any of your preferences, but more importantly, they didn't match any of the ideas or expectations that you imagined up in your head about them. So it's like living with somebody. I mean, you could date someone for 2 years and then move in with them and be like, oh my God, I'm having such a different experience of this person. I mean, of course, because dating someone and maintaining separate quarters and separate space, and then, re-engaging in a more, cohabitating environment is drastically different. So that, I think that's all really interesting. The Gottmans are definitively not a fan of online dating at all whatsoever. And Stephen Bartlett, it was Diary of a CEO, one of my favorite podcasts and YouTube channels. He was the interviewer for his channel and podcast. And one of the other things that he talked about, and I've talked about this in another video that was I was feeling very spicy that day. So we talked a lot about sex. You can look for that. There was a lot more views on that video because everybody likes to talk about sex, especially men. And Stephen was saying that he was dating someone and they held off on sex, and he really was attracted to her and he felt a deep connection, and she kind of checked all his boxes. And then when it came time to get intimate, he couldn't, there was nothing was happening. And it was his first time having that experience, and he had never put being a good lover or sexual chemistry and attraction high up on his bucket list. And he said at that point in his life, he was in his 20s, he only had 2 things, like 2 non-negotiables. And then good sex became another non-negotiable. And the Gottmans agreed. I mean, I think it's very, very difficult to you might have a poor sexual experience and say like, okay, the first times can be a challenge, right? I mean, we could get it wrong. We might not match up. It might not be there. That happened to me with somebody, and I ended up dating him for a year, and we ended up having great sex the first time out. And he was so direct and forthcoming. Like, he was not afraid to, all right, buddy. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind or say things, which is one of the things I loved about him. You always know where you stood. It sucked sometimes that he hurt my feelings. Sometimes he came off super harsh and we would have conversations about it. But he always said how he felt. He was obscenely honest, and he was just extremely direct and forthcoming. And I just adored him for that. And so I'll never forget, after the first time, he was like, well, that was not what I thought it was going to be. And he's like, we need a do-over. And I was like, yeah, I think so. So there are occasions when you can have really bad sex the first time out and then make it better. But if you can't even get there with somebody, you just can't force those things. I mean, if it's not there, it's not there. And if you're giving it a go a couple times around, again, and it's not working, if it's not there, it's not there. So I think my biggest takeaway from this is that we have all of these ideas in our head of what we want and how we want it. And we have our non-negotiables. I've talked about this incessantly. I think most people's non-negotiables are excessive and extreme. People hear me talk and they think that I am like, that it's like a lot. Oh, like that's a lot of information. And if you really cipher through my content, you will see that I'm actually trying to simplify this as much as possible. I believe in giving people a chance. I believe in friendship turning into deep intimacy, and sometimes those are the best relationships. I believe in realistic expectations. So, unrealistic expectations is that partner is going to meet all of your needs. And that person has to be your best friend and your therapist and the best lover you've ever had. You know, I need him to be 6 feet tall. She has to have rock hard abs. I need her to be 15 years younger and in her prime. I mean, listen, I had to shift gears so many times because, I'm not at the age that I can have kids anymore. I mean, well, maybe I could, because my friend back home is going to be 50 and she's making it happen. I mean, if you're still a menstruating woman, you probably could find a way to get pregnant, but I don't want to. My girls are older and that time of my life is over. So I had to switch gears a lot because I'm realistic. I understand that there's men who are going to meet me and they're going to say, I really want to have kids. I understand that I'm going to meet men who are not going to want to be monogamous and they're not going to want to be in any type of long-term relationship. I might meet men who are going to, be so gung-ho about marriage. And for me, that's something that I would definitively need to warm up to. I'm not against it, but it's not something that I need to happen again. It's not that I don't believe in it. I mean, all these people that are poo-pooing marriage, it depends on who you're in that union with. Yeah, Western culture made marriage a business, but you have all these conversations before you take that step. You just need to be in alignment. You need to be able to talk very openly about these things, but it's not something that I need. If I met somebody who wanted to be up my ass all the time, it's just not going to work because I need some space and I need some time by myself, and I really value my solitude. On the flip side of that, quality time is extremely important to me. It's one of the most important things to me. So if that person is completely avoidant and not making any time for me, so you have to know yourself. You have to have these conversations with yourself on understanding what you really value and what you need. So many people ask me, well, how do I know if I'm with the right person? I'm dating so-and-so and I'm just not sure and I don't know. And what do you think? And I always say to people, if you're asking, they're probably not the person. I don't believe in the one. I used to, and I don't. I think you can have several soulmates, several people that you might feel like, oh, this could be the one. And then it ends and then years go by or however long goes by and you meet somebody else and you're like, oh, I never thought I would find somebody that I gelled with so well. What I really believe is you will know. I do think there will be a deep knowing. And the Gottmans talked about this. I just think it will look very different than anything you've ever had. It will feel very different than anything that you've ever had. You won't be going back and forth so much, and you won't be doubting it so much. I think cold feet is normal. I think there's such a thing as healthy doubt, but I'm talking incessantly going back and forth. If you have to keep asking, is this person the one? The answer is no. Again, I really do believe that there will be a deep knowing. And, it's kind of sad that I feel like I'm almost 48 and I haven't really found anyone that I'm remotely interested in at this point. There are people I'm interested in as like friends, and I enjoy my time with them and I like getting to know them better, but there's no one in my life that I'm like, wow, I could really see myself dating this person and I could really go the distance with this person. And it does make me sad because I'm in a very, very different stage than 95% of the people that I meet. Almost every guy that I meet has just gotten divorced and they're just not there. And I'm not interested in being a rebound. And I'm also not interested in being anybody's therapist or a second option. So, I'm 16 years single. I lived on my own for 14 years. I'm very independent. I'm very comfortable being alone. I'm not desperate. I'm not needy. I want a relationship. I don't need a relationship. Here is the other thing. I am not saying if you were someone who just got out of a relationship and you met somebody that you were like, you might even say to yourself, like, why am I meeting this person now? Like, I just got divorced. I just got out of this relationship. The timeline seems so off, but if I let this person pass by, I'm going to kick myself in the ass. Give it a go. Not everybody is a rebound. That's really up to you and how you treat that person. If you're really serious about if you feel ready and serious about getting back into another relationship, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There are no hard, fast rules here. I think I told the story of my friends from back home who were both married, and she started working for him and he was much older, and they felt madly and deeply in love, and they wound up admitting it to each other out loud and made a decision that they were going to go home and be honest with their partners and tell their partners. Now, she did not have children. She was married. He was married with 3 kids. And they went home and they told their partners, and they both got divorced and they got married. So these are people who were both in long-term commitments that never really took a break or never really took a breath. And they went on to have a child together. They got married. They've been, married for I think 17 years now. So what works for one person isn't going to work for another. You have to know yourself really, really well. But I think it was refreshing to listen to the Gottmans. And although they talked about statistics and they talked about case studies and they talked about all those things, I think they have a very realistic worldview on meeting someone and being in the moment with them and leading with curiosity. And if you're genuinely taking an interest in someone, again, let's face it, not everyone's interested in you when you go on a date. They're very interested in themselves. And then, I think one of my biggest pet peeves is that, for sure. But also people that the flitting in and out, the running hot and colds, the wishy and washy. And again, they're telling you who they are. They cannot show up for you. They might be very attracted to you. They might even think that you're a really good fit for them, but they just can't give it to you. Whatever's going on in their life, they're just not there. Shitty communication is a turnoff. People that can't answer you, they can't message you back. You saw that they read your message, and days go by, and it's and they're doing their thing. It's not like they fell off of social media, and you're like, okay, I know where I stand. Thank them. I used to get so mad, and now I'm like, oh, good, great. I know exactly where I stand with this person. But I think some of the best things that you can do in vetting partners is going out on that date and really getting to know somebody. And this is the other thing, because I've talked about this, people using my outdoor group as a dating app, and it's perpetual. It's happening in every outdoor group that I know. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. I just don't ever want anyone in my group to feel uncomfortable, especially if the feelings are not returned and not mutual, right? I don't want that. But thinking that somebody, going on a hike with them, maybe spending a backpacking trip or a camping trip with them, but you're not really going to get a good idea just by going on day hikes with somebody. You actually need to date. You need to date. You need to go on a date. You need to spend one-on-one time together. First of all, you're out in these groups and you're surrounded by a ton of people, and everybody's running around masked up. Nobody's really 100% themselves. So putting yourself in an environment with people where the masks come off, it's probably a really good idea. Probably a really good idea. You want to get to know the real person. Paying attention to how you feel in the moment. Somebody might rock your world and not meet all your perceived preferences and not show up for you the way you have it in your head. And my hope for you is that you're really going to be open to that, because that's a beautiful thing. Let yourself be surprised. Let somebody else take you by surprise. Be really open to different people and entertaining people that are so wildly outside of anything you would have ever been attracted to, or, and anybody that you would entertain. Because I think different and unique is good. If you are dating your clone, that is just boring as fuck. I mean, I think we could all agree with that, right? I think there's so much more growth and healthy challenge in being with someone that you can learn from. Don't you want to learn from your partner? Don't you want to be exposed to different information? But this idea of like, we have to have all the things in common. People always say to me like, well, I'm not a mountain biker and I'm really attracted to a guy that's a mountain biker. And I'm like, so what? Why do you have to be a mountain biker? He could teach you how to mountain bike. That's something you could do together and build your relationship on learning a new skill. So thinking in that way is more of an open-minded, expansive energy. It's just an open stance, and a really healthy stance to meeting people. So I hope this was helpful. Love you to pieces, and we'll talk soon.